Hi everyone, it's Will Frampton here in Boston. I hope you're doing well wherever you are. Thanks for joining us again here on Frontline Perspectives. This is a collaboration among reporters and storytellers around the world. It's our way of making sense of COVID-19 and how we're all dealing with it no matter where we are. Now, across America this week, many states have already started their reopening process. Others are about to begin that process, while some states still have a long way to go. We'll get to some of that, but we figure you've heard a lot of numbers and stats already this week and in weeks prior. So we're going to take more of a conversational approach with the news items that we get to. As we here in the States grapple with what life will look like as we reopen, we know that we're not alone. This is a worldwide problem, and so we're going to hear from our friends around the globe, as we have for the last few weeks, get that worldwide perspective on COVID-19. And finally, there's good news out there. We must seek it. That's what we do here on Frontline Perspectives, and we'll bring you some of those good news stories here at the end of the show. But first, let's meet our team of reporters and storytellers around the world. As always, we have Cristina Mendonsa in Sacramento, California. She's the co-producer of this show. We couldn't be doing it without her. This week, we're also joined by Erik Silverstein in Austin, Texas, and Tina Johansen across the Atlantic in Hillerød, Denmark. That's just north of Copenhagen. We can't wait to speak with all of you in just a few moments, but first, we'll get you a quick update from here in Boston, where finally we've had some spring weather here in the Northeast. It's breathing a lot of energy into people as they're able to enjoy some extended outside time. And people are going to need that energy here because Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker has extended the stay-at-home order until at least May 18th. Also, we told you a couple of weeks ago, face masks were not required here at the time. Well, they're about to be. Starting this week, if you're in a place where you cannot socially distance, you have to wear a mask. The city of Boston has been randomly testing people here for COVID-19 antibodies. They are partnering with Mass General Hospital for that, and we're expecting the results of those tests this coming week. So now, that's the update here from the East Coast. Let's go to Cristina Mendonsa in Sacramento, California. Cristina, I would say nobody has had a more thorough and comprehensive view on what's happening there in California throughout this pandemic. So tell us what's happening right now with the state of affairs there.
Thank you very much, Will. It has been a very active week here in California. Northern California is really crushing the curve. I'll have some new numbers that are very encouraging. We, of course, had the very first stay-at-home order in the country, and that is believed to have helped with that. But now we're starting to see cracks develop in the relationship between the governor and cities and counties. Cities and counties are taking a first look at their budgets moving forward, and it doesn't look good. And many of them are writing the governor to talk about that. We also are seeing additional protests as people get out of the house, start protesting both here at the state capitol and also in Southern California on Orange County beaches, which the governor closed last week. We do see more face masks. There are certain cities and store chains that are requiring masks now for folks, but you also see a lot of people walking around without them. We're going to get more into all of that, including those encouraging numbers. But let's go around the world right now to Denmark. Tina Johansen is standing by in Hillerød, Denmark. Tina?
Hi, Christine. Thanks. Yeah, I'm from Denmark, and we are starting the beginning of reopening the society here after 5 weeks of lockdown. For the last 2 weeks, our kids have been back to kindergarten and school up until the age of approximately 11. The older kids still have to wait a bit. Next week we expect the Prime Minister to come up with what the next plans are for reopening the society. There have been a lot of political discussions about what criteria should be met next, so that will be interesting to follow. And next is Erik Silverstein, Austin, Texas.
Thanks, Tina. My name is Erik Silverstein, and I'm the owner of the Peach Tortilla restaurants in Austin, Texas. I'm going to be talking a little bit today about the impact of coronavirus and COVID-19 on the hospitality industry, specifically in Austin. Governor Abbott just opened up restaurants to dining on May 1st at 25% capacity. I'll talk a little bit about the impact of those orders on our industry and what that means for our future survival. Back to you, Will.
Erik, thank you very much. Great to have all of you on from your respective places globally. Fascinating vantage points we'll get from everyone here coming up. But Cristina, let's get it back out to you for a more in-depth look at Boy, what an active week it has been there in California. And we've sort of seen this building up. You and I have been talking about this for a couple of weeks now. You've been seeing signs that people are starting to crack a little bit, and now you're really seeing some signs. Take us through it.
Well, the frustration definitely is starting to build, but let me lead with some great news, and that is that Northern California at least is crushing the curve. The city of Sacramento, which is the capital city of California, now has the lowest infection rate for a major metro area in the whole country. That huge tidal wave that they expected to hit hospitals in California never materialized. They were expecting just a tsunami of COVID cases, so the state ramped up very quickly. And here's kind of the fallout from that. What we're seeing now is that hospitals are cutting back staff. A lot of nurses and doctors who thought they were going to be on the front lines of treating COVID-19 patients are now finding themselves furloughed, finding their hours cut, because not only did that tsunami of COVID patients not materialize, but a lot of the other surgeries that usually happen within hospitals, or people coming in with strokes and heart attacks, they're not coming in. People aren't coming in. Some people aren't coming in if they have an injury. So hospitals just aren't seeing that many patients right now, and that is having a big financial impact on them. We're also seeing more protests, and that's what we have been talking about this week a lot, with the frustration. So here at the Capitol last week, there was a big protest. About 1,000 people came out. We had heard they were going to stay in their cars and just kind of circle the Capitol. That didn't happen. They got out of their cars and ended up on the Capitol steps. Now, the California Highway Patrol, which gives out permits for protests here in the capital city, they weren't giving them out as of mid-April. So those folks were in violation. They didn't have a permit. So there were some arrests, about 30 arrests there. As I said, there's some additional cracks that are forming now between the governor and cities and counties, because they're taking a look at their budgets now going forward, and they are very distressed. And here's just one example of a letter that was sent out. This is from a small suburb of Sacramento called Folsom. They are looking at potential draconian cuts in public services and say that we're looking at a shortfall of $7 billion in revenue for California cities right now. And that's just as of right now. Not good news in terms of the financial fallout that is now starting to hit California as people start to wake up to the reality of what this extended stay-at-home order will do. At the same time, we are seeing encouraging news in terms of just crushing those numbers, crushing the curve here in Northern California.
Cristina, never a dull day there on the West Coast as it relates, well, any week for that matter, never a dull day out there, but especially right now, just so many moving parts as it relates to all that we're dealing with this pandemic. Thank you, Cristina. Let's go now to Austin, Texas, and Erik Silverstein. Thanks for being with us, Erik. You are the owner of an incredibly successful restaurant, the Peach Tortilla, a series of restaurants you have now. I've known you for a long time, and I've seen the meteoric rise of your restaurant, and then everything stopped 2 months ago. Erik, what's the mood there in Texas, in Austin where you are, and also sort of statewide as best you can tell?
I would probably describe the mood in Austin specifically as lukewarm. I think there's definitely some trepidation in terms of people's willingness to go out right now. I think the more cautious approach is generally the one that's favored right now, given just the lack of concrete information on this virus right now.
It's a tough question for every business. You reach that point where you have to make a decision. You've had to be closed now, essentially, besides takeout, for quite a while. When do you think you'll reopen?
Well, one of my restaurants, my original restaurant, is open for takeout, carry-out, delivery. That business, luckily, it's at least a break-even point, so we don't necessarily need to open up for dining quite yet, and we're going to take our time in making that decision. My other location, we do have some fixed overhead and a rent payment due every month. And so the clock is ticking to reopen. We have to reopen in 2020. It's just not a sustainable business model to wait until 2021. So I think our plan is to run a skeleton crew, start with curbside takeout, potentially sit our very large patio with people from a distance in June, and then sort of take this baby steps approach towards ramping up for business. But I think what you're going to end up seeing is a hodgepodge of business models from restaurant to restaurant, because there is no clear-cut plan of attack in terms of doing business in this operating environment.
You touched on a point that I wanted to get to anyway, and that is, what what does the future of what does the restaurant of tomorrow look like? Knowing that in many places we're being asked to put on masks inside. Well, if you're eating, you can't have a mask on. So that sort of takes that out of the equation. Is it tables being farther apart, like you said? Is it? Are we looking at many restaurants going out of business and not coming back? What do you see?
Well, we're certainly going to see restaurants not come back. I mean, that's a definite. I think you'll see the attrition rate start to rise as we get into the summer, and especially after those PPP loans are over and done with. A lot of restaurants did get those loans, and it's sort of an 8-week life raft. But after that, all bets are off because those loans need to be paid back within 2 years. As far as what that means for dining in general and what the dining scene is going to look like in the next year, it's really tough to say. I can tell you right now that people don't necessarily want to go and eat out in Texas with a face mask on. It's not hospitality. And it certainly doesn't feel normal to have a server come up to you wearing a set of masks and gloves and talking to you from a distance. So I think what you'll end up seeing is a hard shift towards delivery and takeout that we've already seen. And I think once restaurants run the numbers, they may look to keep that delivery in-house. I also think you'll see some dining outside. Unfortunately, in Texas, it gets really hot here in the summer, and that might prevent us from seeing the kind of numbers we want in terms of dine-in business on the patio.
Yeah, a lot of hard questions to be answered coming up they already have been answered, and they will remain in play for restaurants to deal with, and like yours, in the coming weeks and months. Erik, thanks so much for joining us with your insight there from Austin, Texas. Let's go now finally across the Atlantic Ocean to Tina Johansen. She is in Hillerød, Denmark. That's just a little bit north of Copenhagen. Tina, great to have you on. We are fascinated here in the States with how other countries are handling this and are, in your case, coming out of it. You've already referenced that. Denmark is now starting to emerge from this lockdown. What is the spirit of the people there right now?
I would say it's a positive spirit right now, because now we can finally see our kids play again and having fun, go to school and kindergarten, even though it's a new circumstance to go to school, because it's not just going back as it was. They have been divided into smaller groups, smaller classes, playgrounds have been divided into smaller areas, so they still try to keep the social distance, but still we accept that children are children, and we cannot tell them to stay 2 meters apart. But there's a positive feel in Denmark at the moment.
Right, kids will be kids no matter where you are in the world. This idea of social distancing does not apply very much to 4- and 5-year-olds. They will be children, right? What has Denmark done right?
I would say we really shut down very fast when we saw that the numbers rose quickly. We actually didn't think that COVID-19 was going to be something that would reach Denmark, but we had a lot of tourists coming from Italy and Austria, so we quickly saw that they brought it back to Denmark, and within 1 or 2 weeks the Prime Minister, she shut down the country, and we all took it very seriously from day one. And I really think that was why we now see a curve that has flattened and even going down.
It's fascinating, those smaller countries, as we've noticed, as we've profiled countries around the world and how they're responding. Smaller countries can be more nimble in dealing with this. They can respond faster, perhaps, than larger countries can. To that effect, your neighbor, right next door, Sweden, handled their response very differently, as many of us have now seen. What are people there saying about how they did it?
Most people here in Denmark think that Sweden is doing it the wrong way, because we can see that their death counts are like 3 times higher per million capita in Sweden than in Denmark. We can also see that a lot of the elderly people have been sick and also died from this disease. We can see that they are still going to restaurants, sitting outside. It's really difficult as a neighboring country to see that they don't take it seriously, because we have seen all the horrible pictures from Italy and Spain, so we obviously thinks that Sweden could end up there as well.
Well, I guess we will wait and see where they finally end up. Just fascinating, though, the difference in how the two countries have handled this. So let's bring it now back to the good news, which we always try and end on with this show. We seek the good news because it is all around us. I'm going to start on my end, actually back in my hometown of Atlanta, Georgia. Here's what happened a little over a week ago. My longtime hairdresser, a man named Steve Hightower, was one of the first businesses to reopen. I know this is somewhat controversial for a lot of people, but hair salons seem to be the businesses that people want to see open up first because people need their hair cut. And let's listen to Steve just for a second on his reopening.
There's a sign on my front door. It's like no mask, no service. So when you come in, you must be wearing a mask.
So Steve Hightower has been doing my hair and also my family's hair for 10 years now. And I can tell you, in looking at the email that he sent out to his clients on all the things you have to do to go in there to get a haircut, having your temperature taken at the door, no mask, no service, everyone in there is wearing masks and gloves. It almost makes you feel like you're perhaps even safer in there than you might be in a grocery store. Through all of it, you see that a small business like his now has hope. So, Cristina, you have good news, as always, there in California. Let's hear it.
We do, and you know, I've been inspired by so many people here. So we are seeing a lot of people that are putting up graduation signs on the lawns of high school graduates. You know, they've had a lot of their graduation ceremonies canceled. So there is an effort as graduation approaches to try to reach out to them. Also, an effort by our farmers. California is a huge agricultural state, and a lot of those farmers are now, instead of dumping their milk into trenches or plowing over crops, they're now donating those food supplies to food banks. So we've seen kind of a farm to food bank movement, which is perfect timing because we have many more families that are accessing food banks. The food banks in our area and in Southern California as well have seen those numbers just swell with more families needing that service. So a lot of those farmers are stepping in. We saw truckloads of agricultural products heading to food banks around the state this week. So those are a couple of bits of good news out of California, as well as crushing the curve, as we're doing in Northern California.
Yeah, that's probably the best news I think I've seen in a headline all week. There and across the North State, it's great to see those numbers. We hope that it starts to replicate in the southern part of the state as well. Erik, on to you now in Austin. What's your good news?
I mean, my good news is really centered around how Austin has rallied to really support local businesses, specifically restaurants, over the past 7 weeks. When we went dark, so to speak, and turned strictly to curbside and takeout, we thought we would do $400 to $500 a night, and we ended up doing, 8 to 10 times the volume. And it's because the people in the community really want to support local businesses. That's given me some hope that we can survive this pandemic and come out on the other end of this thing. Austin has always supported its local businesses, and I think it will continue to do so. So that's my silver lining throughout this whole process.
And I have to say, Erik, it was impressive to see you pivot so quickly. I saw what you did. You made those takeout meals for families with instructions on them on how to cook them at home. So it's a combination of people like you pivoting and finding a new business model, along with the people of your community supporting what you do. So excellent news there. Thank you for that. And finally, on to Tina back in Denmark. And Tina, I have to say, I've seen the pictures you've sent of your family and just life sort of starting to look somewhat normal again, as much as it can be. And it's great to see the children out there, isn't it?
It is really great to see the children. Also, and last week there were also permission now to see some of the elderly people at the elderly homes just for outside visits. They have been isolated now for 7 weeks, so lots of us have missed to see our grandparents and elderly people. Up until then, we have only been able to wave through a window. So it has been really great to see some sort of normalization in our society and to be able to socialize again.
Well, those sorts of images give a lot of us a lot of hope, where back in the States here, many of us have not been able to let our kids play with their friends for a long time now. And so we're all looking forward to having scenes like that here as well. So, to Tina Johansen there in Denmark, Erik Silverstein in Austin, Texas, and as always, Cristina Mendonsa in Sacramento, California. Wonderful having you all on for this latest edition of Frontline Perspectives. Remember, there's good news out there. We must seek it. We will all come through this, as the saying has gone, together. Until then, we'll see you next time. Take care.